David Silverman, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's an honor to get to talk to you, and you're just so much of an influence on The Simpsons and the design and the look. And I'm a huge Simpsons fan, and we want to get into talking about the 15th anniversary of the Simpsons movie. But I just wanted to know, as a kid,
15 years. Wow.
15 years,
Yes.
right? But as a kid,
Yeah.
when did you fall in love with animation?
Oh, I think when I was very young, I think by the time I was 5, I knew what I wanted to do. And that was animation, believe it or not. I've been drawing ever since I can remember. I think most of us, our memories start around 4. And I just remember drawing around that time and continuing to draw and being influenced by everything I was seeing on TV. When I was a kid, there was a show called it was a funny Roadrunner show, and that was the introduction to me to all the Warner Brothers cartoons, and and a former Warner's animator, Bob Clampett, had a show called Beanie and Cecil, which was different, but you could tell the humor was in the same general direction. And of course, there was a Rocky and Bullwinkle show that was also very influential because it was very limited and crude animation, but even my young mind could tell, but these drawings are funny. I don't care that, yes, I can tell the difference that the Warner's animation is this and this animation is this, but it didn't matter. It was like it looked funny and it was funny. And same with the early days of Hanna-Barbera, like Yogi Bear, Quick Draw McGraw, Huckleberry Hound. This is what my childhood was about in those animated years, as well as the comics page, particularly Peanuts and Walt Kelly's Pogo, who I later found out Walt Kelly was a former Disney animator who started his famous and influential strip. If you don't know it, look it up on Google. I recommend it. And of course, what's interesting is Disney was an influence, but not as much, simply because it wasn't available.
Hmm.
This is back in the day when a Disney feature wouldn't show up in the theaters. That was the only way to see things back in the 60s. Every 7 years, that's when they would sort of rotate out their classic films. And of course, an animated film from Disney around that time was, they came out very seldomly. So that was initially less of an influence, but I would watch The Wonderful World of Walt Disney, and that was also that's where I glimpsed at Disney animation, and that was always exciting for me. But you see, the comics page was also a big influence. By the way, this is leading up to final really big influence was Mad Magazine. As I
Oh,
got
yeah.
older, when I say older, I mean by the time I was 7, my dad had introduced me to Mad Magazine. My dad was very good at introducing me to things like that. And then all those artists, from Mort Drucker to Don Martin to Dave Berg to Sergio Aragonés, who I've gotten the pleasure to know very well. All those artists completely, yeah, it was just sort of like a parade of art and cartoonists.
So you fall in love with it at a very young age. When do you realize that you have the talent to go on and turn this into a career?
It was an interesting thing because you see, my dad was a professor at the University of Maryland, chemical engineering, but also a big fan of humor. And he also introduced me. Well, he and my mother, who was an art historian, they introduced me to all sorts of things like Chaplin and Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello and all the old great classic W.C. Fields. In addition to what was happening, contemporary as well. And I think around the time I was doing cartoons, I was about 9 years old, and I was doing drawings, and my parents were showing it to their adult friends who were laughing uproariously at what I was drawing. And I thought, well, maybe I could do this professionally. if I'm 9 and I'm making my adult parents' friends laugh, maybe there's something to this.
I mean,
So I decided to stick with it.
that's talent
Although,
at a very young age.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't a drawing prodigy per se. I mean, I drew funny, but I wasn't like my good friend Eric Goldberg was literally a prodigy when it came to drawing. I mean, he's a fantastic. He maybe still one of the fastest animators alive. And he did the genie character for Aladdin. That's his sort of his biggest claim to fame, but other great things too, like the Rhapsody Blue segment and the Fantasia 2000. But Eric can draw incredibly, starting at a very young age. I drew funny. I don't know about incredibly. And I had funny thoughts as well, like my friend Eric did. So anyhow, although I want to say at one point in high school, or I got to high school, I thought, well, I don't know about animation. I should be an architect, which I really do love architecture. So I took mechanical drawing and architectural drawing, and I'm glad I did because they were very useful. But I had this art teacher who she's, I remember her, Carolyn Ayotte was her name. And she looked at me one time because I was also taking art classes, doing some sort of cartooning. She just sort of sighed and said, David, don't be an architect, be a commercial artist or a cartoonist. You're just too good. Which made me like, what? so I kept getting a little prodded by, as I say, adults who, I respected their opinion because they seemed like they didn't suffer fools gladly. So I guess around that time I said, okay, I guess I'm done with architecture. I'm going to focus on drawing funny pictures. And that's what happened. And if I may, I can show you a few things.
Okay.
My magical background. Oh, by the way, this is a shot from Blood Feud, which is a show I directed in the second season. And this is one of my favorite drawings that I did, a layout drawing for Homer dictating a letter to Bart. Anyhow, so I had that up here. But I wanted to show you all art I had done and music plays. You may know that I'm known as playing a flaming tuba from time to time.
Yes.
Yes. So music has played a fascination with me. This is like one of my earlier drawings in high school. As I said, I drew funny. I wasn't the best artist, but I quickly learned because from here I went to drawing this, which was a caricature of an orchestra, because I wanted to learn how to draw all the instruments in the orchestra. And I was inspired, by the way, by a guy named Jared Hoffman. And this is almost very much following his model of an orchestra, a great British cartoonist, and coincidentally, also a tuba player. He was a brilliant artist from the 50s who died tragically young at the age of like 38. And he was also a radio personality, had these Hoffman musical festivals that were all a caricature of music. But anyhow, this led to, this is a sketch. I pitched an idea when I was 18 to the National Symphony Orchestra of Washington, D.C. to do a caricature of their orchestra, which I subsequently did. And I did this finished. It took me about 2 years, and also while I was at the University of Maryland, setting up an independent study class to help finish it, which everybody was like, sure, kid, whatever you want to do. And anyhow, music and drawing has always gone hand in hand with me, because this led to none of examples right off the bat, but it led to me when I got to UCLA and studying animation there. A friend of mine was a critic, a stringer critic with the Los Angeles Times. And by the way, his name is Charles Solomon. He's a very famous critic and writer of books on animation today. He's very much, he's specializes today in anime, and has terrific books on anime. Anyhow, but he was a young critic stringer for the LA Times, and the music critic, Martin Bernheimer, was looking for an artist who had a sense of classical music and, drawing musicians. And he said, oh, I have a guy just for you. So that's led to that. That went to there. And from there, I was seen by a company called Alfred Publishing, and I illustrated their piano books. And that's sort of the start of my artistic career, basically, as an artist and cartoonist.
And then I think it all goes back to you just knowing how to draw funny at a very early age, because I think that's what they were looking for when they were starting The Simpsons back in the 80s. They needed just something that looked completely different on TV. The original drawings were just so unique. So how did you get that first job, being the first one hired on to The Simpsons?
Oh, well, the first one, really the first one hired on in terms of the animation would be Wes Archer. And Wes, brilliant animation cartoonist, animator, director. He's the supervising director of Rick and Morty currently, and he was after Simpsons. He went and was supervising director of King of the Hill, and other things like that. Has a great student film called Jack Mack and Rad Boy Go, which is probably floated around on YouTube, which I recommend. And he worked for this small company, I mean, really small company called Klasky Chupo, which that name may ring a bell, but at the time it was very small. And they did occasional character commercials, character animation commercials, but they mostly did what was called motion graphics, which was a big Oxberry animation computer camera, which you could shoot film like, multiple times and create effects, nearly digital like effects in the early 80s and so forth. That was primarily what they mostly did, those sort of commercials. But Wes had worked, I guess, occasionally for them to do character animation. Wes and I met on One Crazy Summer, directed by Savage Steve Holland, animation direction by Bill Kopp, whom I had met, and he brought me on as an animator on that live action film with about 10 minutes of animation, and I met Wes from there. Anyhow, after One Crazy Summer wrap, we worked from 85 to 86. And I was thinking actually of focusing on illustration and putting the brakes on animation for a while, because I just wanted to focus on my own personal style. But Wes got first Bill Kopp involved with the Tracy Ullman Show in the beginning of 87, because Klasky Chupo had gotten the contract to do the animation for The Simpsons, for Matt Groening's, where we just didn't know it was called The Simpsons. It was just like working with Matt Groening, and we loved Matt Groening's work. Life in Hell was one of our favorite underground comics, and just the style and the humor. And we thought, oh, that'd be fun to animate. And that's how the whole thing started. It was started in March of 87, and it was Wes and Bill Kopp and myself as the three animators starting on the Tracy Ullman shorts. Bill Kopp left towards the end of the first 20 episodes that we did to connect with Savage Steve Holland and do Eek the Cat, which he wrote and directed and voiced. But Wes and I kept on, and we animated all 48 Trace Ullman shorts between 87 and the beginning of 89. And it was around that time we heard about the show becoming a series. And there are various reasons why it is. I always remember when Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out in 88, I thought, oh my God, this is a watershed moment in animation. I could tell that this is a turning point. And it was. It was a big turning point in animation. And I guess we'd heard rumblings. Apparently, James L. Brooks says that I helped grease the skids to going into a series by approaching him in a rather I had a few drinks on my belt and kind of said something about, I remember saying something about, I'm glad that you're giving us an opportunity to do really adult animation on a primetime show, because it was really kind of cool. That was our animation. There was no connection overseas, just me and Wes and Bill animating and cleaning it up and timing it and doing everything. And it was, painted by Georgie Pelusi, who gave them the distinctive yellow color. And by the way, you see how Bart doesn't have a hairline? He's just a shape.
I see
That's
that.
why she made yellow, because yellow worked as a skin and hair color for characters that had no hairline, like Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. And you don't want to destroy the graphic integrity or the shape by adding a hairline. So her solution was, well, I can't make them the cartoon flesh color, so I'll make them yellow.
So that's the reason the Simpsons are yellow?
I think that is to my mind the primary reason.
That's amazing.
I never asked her directly, but it makes the most sense, because otherwise you'd have to do some. I mean, as I say, the traditional cartoon flesh color would not work for Bart, Lisa, and Maggie that well. They'd have flesh color, skin, and hair. Yellow, you kind of buy them as, light skinned blondes or something. But I digress. Anyhow, I approached, I guess Jim tells me that I suggest I was sort of emphatic. This has to be an animated show. Now I might have said that, probably I did, but in any event, I didn't hurt the matter. Let's put it that way. He was glad to meet somebody who had the same kind of passion and energy and tenacity. He thought, well, if I have people like that in the animation side, maybe there's something to this. I don't know. Regardless of the case, in the beginning of May of '89, we started working on The Simpsons as a series. The first thing I did was I designed the main title sequence. Wes worked on really defining Wes is a stronger draftsman than I am, far and away. He really solidified the model sheets for the main characters. Later, I went in and I started devising ways of how to draw the characters for new animators, because things were going like way off the rails. We only had like a turnaround model sheet, and I thought I got to do some construction type drawings to demonstrate how to sort of analyze a character and break it down and to draw it. And then other people follow through in that respect. So in that way, I think I've got credit for helping to really solidify the designs down, because I guess when I was directing the first season with a lot of young animators and even experienced ones who weren't used to drawing in this kind of style. This was a new type of style. I would say the more, shall we say, seasoned animators that we worked with, there's the Hanna-Barbera style and the Disney style and the Warner Brothers style, but this was a Matt Groening style as interpreted by me and Wes Archer. And it was a different approach. Now it's very common that, even after this happened, it became the norm that you'd have a creator-driven project with a specific style to the creator artist, if you will. But back then it was totally new, and so that's when we realized we got to start coming up with device ways for the people to analyze the characters so they can draw them properly. And by properly, the way that Wes and I were drawing them.
So looking at the show now, how long does a single episode of The Simpsons take from when it's written to when it comes to you? Like, how does it come to you?
Well, it comes to us generally speaking, it comes to us on a table read. That's the first time we get it. And I remember in the very beginning too, that was my first experience. There was a table read for Bart the Genius. That was the first show I directed. And I remember thinking, this is the funniest thing ever written for animation at the time. I just thought this is genius. Oh, by the way, one small little thing I have to say. The studio that Classy Chupo started in at 729 North Seward in Los Angeles, California, if you want to check it out, was a studio that Bob Clampett had to do the aforementioned Beanie and Cecil show. So there was sort of a connection to, in my mind, great animation history. In fact, Bob had passed, but Sodie Clampett, his wife, widow, was still there. We became friendly, and I met the family, Ruth, Sherry, and Bob Jr. And I just think it was a great connection. Anyhow, so table read. It's about 9 months.
9 months for one episode.
There are a lot, but what you have it's meticulous. You have the table read, and then you have the storyboard process, and then notes on storyboard, and then we do an animatic process, and that's a number of weeks of doing all the drawings for the animatic. We used to lay out the entire show basically before we decided to story reel the entire show. Save a lot of time and money that way. And then comes, the finished animation and timing it, and then going out to our Korean studio, either ACOM or Rough Draft Korea, and they take like 10 weeks to animate, fill in the mostly. And we actually do a lot of animation. We do all this key posing, heavily key posed our shows, but it takes them 10 weeks to finish it up and paint it. It used to be painted on cells, and but now it's digitally painted, but still takes the same length of time. It's still time consuming.
You're saying 9 months for one episode, but you're working on several different episodes. I mean, the whole season. How in the world do you get an entire season done like that?
I might be wrong. I could be wrong. It might be closer to like 7 months, and maybe the 2 months I'm also counting in is the writing process. I mean, I have to take a look at it. I'm sorry, I don't have my notes with me,
You're good.
but all I can tell you, it takes a chunk of time.
Yeah.
And what it is like, okay, here's this timeline for, let's say, the first episode of the season, right? And then here's the next episode, and here's the next episode, here's the next episode. So they're staggered, right? So one director is working on this, and our second director is working on this with his, animation team, and so forth. And then we have, we have designers that work on all the shows basically at all the times. So there's, imagine it's like different moving trains, but they're all a week apart. And they leave the station, and then the film arrives here, and then they come back on a weekly basis. Oh, that's why we start in March. So we start the process of storyboarding in March to make our times for the next, for the fall season. And we have like 7 episodes, 6 to 7 episodes for the previous schedule to sort of give us a head start onto the next season. As we went through in season after season, we started building up. Oh, we have 2 additional episodes, so that gives more of a break to get to, to allow the process to continue. And then somehow, and I can't remember how we got it up to, but we had like 6 what we called holdover episodes. So we do 22 episodes a year, and like 17 is usually the last show that'll be broadcast that year in May, and the following, 6 or 7 episodes will be for the following season, and they'll head the beginning of the season, and so forth and so on. It keeps rolling on, man.
So looking now back at the movie, it's been 15 years since the Simpsons movie, and you're saying that one episode takes 9 months. How long? Like, how do you even? Which you directed the movie? How does that process begin of going from just we're going to make this one episode to making this full movie, full length feature that's never been done before?
People often ask us, "Why didn't you do another one?" Well, the Simpson movie damn near killed us, because it's not like we had another team of people. We did expand to some extent, to do the movie, but we had a lot of the people that work on the show also working on the movie simultaneously. Now, some kind of like I had 4 sequence directors, and 2 were not on the show, or they had been on the show. Rich Moore and Lauren McMullen had been on the show previously. Rich had been working on Futurama at the time, I think. Yeah, it's hard to put everything together. But in any event, and then we had 2 other who were working on the show, Mike Anderson and Steve Moore. And they were my 4 sequence directors, because that was one way we got it done so fast, is I had field generals, because we had to do everything at once, all in a great big box. So I had to delegate quite a bit in that respect, but and still make it look like it was dealt from one hand, because it's a movie. But the writing started, I think they really got started in like 2003. And by 2005, there was a table read in the summer of 2005. And we really started storyboarding in 2006. We did it rather fast when you think about it, because we started in the production in January of 2006. And we basically got it done under like 15 months, which is pretty fast considering it's a feature. And pretty fast because a lot of stuff we did was thrown out the window. We had to start over on a lot of Act 1. But I don't know. I guess we all had, we're all pretty seasoned people. And we got other people involved too. This guy, Steve Markowski, who did a great job. He was almost like a 5th sequence director. He did a lot of great board work for me. But I mean, that's how we got things done. We just kind of plowed through it, and we were still drawing on paper at the time. We hadn't gone digital, although I started working on Cintiq tablet, the Wacom Cintiq tablet, where you take a stylus and you draw directly onto the screen. And that kind of got the attention of our it was president of Gracie Films, Richard Sakai. He's like, "Oh, this is the way to go." And I say, "Absolutely, this is the way to go." We started boarding. We started buying Cintiqs for the board artists, which made things very much go faster, because the story was mercurial in many respects, and things kept changing. Particularly the character of Cargill. Originally, he was like this kind of like a sad sack, head of the EPA who was like, miserable because he was not respected. And then this thing happens in Springfield. He's given all this power and resources. That storyline wasn't working because, we were like, we're doing Simpsons movie. It should be about the Simpsons. And we're concentrating this character we've never heard of before, voiced by Albert Brooks, who's just like kind of a semi-regular on the Simpsons, but still not very entertaining. So that's when we kind of pitched that all out and said, okay, for a hot second, we actually thought Hank Scorpion would be the head of the EPA, and that was then tossed out rather quickly. And Albert Brooks, actually, he was one of the people who said that doesn't work for me. And Albert Brooks, though doing the voice, is also a very accomplished comic director. So his instincts are worth listening to. But he basically did a Scorpio type of character, an aggressive. It's as if Donald Rumsfeld ran the EPA, and that was sort of like the idea behind it.
So you're saying the first movie almost killed you guys. So should we not expect a sequel anytime, like ever in our lifetime?
Oh, I think that I never say never. It's like one of these things that that will happen possibly. I look. I can't go on record saying it's going to happen, and it's not. I can't go on record saying it's not going to happen because I can't go on record saying anything.
Got it.
I can't give you no scoop because you know what? I don't know.
So I was rewatching the movie, and obviously you're able to do now in this movie things you couldn't do on TV. But I wonder, was there a meeting about how to draw Bart Simpson's wiener?
Yeah. I don't think there was a meeting about that, but I sort of did it. I went for it tastefully.
So
enough so we would get away with it, let's put it that way. And we were really, really, really worried that was going to be a problem from the censors. I mean, we didn't know what we were going to do. We figured we could get away with it with European audiences, but we just did not know how it was going to react. And to this day, I'm grateful for the ratings board for apparently, actually their rating was, I think it was it PG or PG-13? I think rated PG 13 for adult humor throughout. I think that was their rating, which was like almost a mini review, which was very flattering to us. Yeah, it was a lot of work. Let's put it that way. It was a lot of work, but I remember at one point I was like, this is a lot of work, but hey, you wanted to do this, so let's enjoy it. So I did it throughout all the work and stressful times. I did enjoy myself, I think. And I think at the end of the day, everybody else, even though it was a lot of work, enjoyed themselves too. Certainly we enjoyed the way it came out, and certainly enjoyed the way it was responded to.
I think you worked on one of my favorite Simpsons episodes of all time, Summer of 4'2".
Yes, well, I was supervising director at the time, so I didn't have as strong of a voice in it as you may think, but do go on.
There's a scene wherever Homer is talking to Ned Flanders, and he's like leaning up against the fence, and his hand is doing like this weird, intricate motion. I wonder how, like, when you think of a animation like that, is it just so painful to do, even though it looks so simple?
It depends. I mean, I think when we're doing something really inventive and interesting, you just kind of get into it, no matter how, never mind how difficult it may be. But, that sort of reminds me of, one of my favorite bits of animation is this one. This is, of course, Homer skipping through the land of chocolate. This is something I did do. And this is a cycle fortunately, I was smart enough to Xerox these drawings. So I would always have, because I was happy the way this came out. And when I went about this, Mark Kirkland was directing it, and I was supervising director at this point. At the third season, they made me supervising director. And Mark said, well, they're having trouble with the layout is not coming out as funny as your storyboard. I actually boarded the sequence because when I read the script, I fell out of my chair laughing. I think it's because just what I imagined in my head, because it wasn't really on the page. So it says Homer skips after chocolate bunnies. That's all it said. And I guess this popped into my head, which made me laugh, was it says a delirious, you know, so I started like doing the extremes of the poses that I wanted to do. And then I thought, well, I think I'll do a breakdown. I think I'll do a breakdown of the breakdown. And a break, you know what? I'm just going to animate the whole thing. So I did. So I decided to animate the entire cycle just because I wanted to have this certain sort of like, I didn't know how to just do the extreme drawings and explain to the animator in Korea how to in between it without doing it, and I figured I just had time, like I would like tinker on it every now and then when I had a free moment. So
So looking at that animation now, how does that work into the entire episode? Do you just draw that and then somebody else that's what gets shipped off?
yeah, they got shipped off, and also the bunny who was skipping after I also animated. So those segments, those two pieces of animation for the scene were entirely animated, basically here. And then, of course, the backgrounds were done, and then we were timing basically. What we would do is that in the exposure sheets, we would put the drawings in where they go, how they go, and one after the other, and how the background pans behind it. So there you go. That was it.
Well, this has been incredible to get an insight on how this animation stuff works and how much it went into making the movie. Did you keep anything from the movie? Like, I know there were so many like promo things that came out. There was maybe like a cell or something that you kept from the movie.
Well, no, we didn't have any cells from the movie because by that point we were digitally painting and compositing, so we were still drawing on paper. I I guess I have some sketches hanging around, but I don't have much because most of the artwork was basically, was sent overseas to Korea, and I don't know where it is. It's in somebody's Fox's vault or something like that. So no, I do not have a lot of art from the movie per se, and a lot of the art that I do have would actually be drawn digitally because at that point, at least for me on the movie, it was more efficient to draw on the Cintiq than to draw onto paper.
Well, David,
So
well, David, I really appreciate the time. I think if anybody wants to see more of your work, definitely follow you on Twitter at Tubatron. And I love all the little sketches you put up there and the behind the scenes stuff.
yes, and I think people know this. Some people who know my stuff have seen that this was going to be the ending of the Christmas special, but we decided not to. We decided to have this as an off-screen sort of thing as opposed to showing it. I think Jim Brooks said, it's funny, but let's not go quite to that extreme." Well, we were hedging our bets back in 1989,
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right, have a
Take
good
care,
one.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.